All right, so today you're going to talk about 5, 6, and that is agricultural production regions. So basically, this is where agriculture takes place, and there's some theories that you get introduced to here. So if you remember, 5, 4, and 5, 5 were and 5, 3, 5, 4, 5, 5 were the first, second, and third agricultural revolutions. So now you're on to 5, 6. Because we know the history of agriculture, right? So here we're going to explain economic forces influence agricultural practices. People are in this to make money. Okay, so they're going to find ways where it's the most beneficial for them to make money. That's capitalism, right? That's how it works. And people did this even before we had capitalism. Agricultural production regions are defined by the extent to which they reflect subsistence or commercial practices. Okay, commercial practices, for example, that you'll see here are monocropping or monoculture. Intensive, remember that's lots of work, but in a small area. And extensive farming practices are big. Remember, extensive is big areas. They're determined in part by the cost of the land, and that's where we'll get into the bid rent theory later in this lesson. Okay, so crop rotation is exactly what it sounds like. You change crops on your land year in and year out. It keeps your land more fertile, right? So they learned a long time ago that if you plant the same crop on the same piece of land year after year, eventually you burn the nutrients out of the ground. Like you take them out and they're gone. So if you plant corn one year, soybeans the other year, wheat the other year, then it works, right? That still works. However, part of the third agricultural revolution was the chemicals that came in. So now with chemicals and pesticides, you can do that. You can plant more than one year in a row in your fields and still be productive. Okay. That's what monocropping is. Monocropping is you grow a single crop year after year on the same land. Okay. Instead of rotating crops. Okay. So polyculture that's defined there. We'll get to that a little bit later here too. But corn, soybeans, and wheat are three common crops that are often grown using monocropping techniques. Okay, so what's the effect of monocropping? What's the effect of being able to plant the same thing on the same land every year? So where does it happen? It happens large scale commercial farms in developed countries. So that's right here. That's America. That's Illinois. That's what we're talking about. So the good of this is that it produces more of that crop. So if it's corn, well, you're going to produce more corn. Mass production means more of that crop. More crop means less production. Less expensive for us. That's supply and demand, right? The bad part of this is if you have these huge agribusiness farms that are company owned and they are producing an enormous amount of corn, the small family farmer gets pushed out of business because they can't compete because of the economies of scale. What that means is that you can have a smaller profit margin. If you're a big farmer, you're still going to make plenty of money and you can sell your stuff cheaper because you're producing so much stuff. If you're a small farmer, you can't do that. You got to make a certain amount of money on your crop, on your harvest. Otherwise, you don't succeed. And it becomes not worth it for you to farm anymore. Therefore, you sell your land to a bigger farm and you're done. Okay. Or you sell your land to a land developer that wants to put a neighborhood on your farmland and you take your millions of dollars and go somewhere else. That's also not good because that means we have less farmland in production. So family farms get crushed. That's the bad. This is kind of like the Enclosure Act in Europe in the previous one of the previous lessons, where the small farmer got pushed out because the big farmer was producing way more than them. Okay, that's economies of scale. They can produce tons of crops and make more money than a small farm. So those agribusinesses can produce way more, which is good for us, but it does edge out the small farmer because they can't compete with those prices. Okay, so that's agribusiness, right? You integrate various steps of production into the food processing industry. So let's say you owned a plant that made corn syrup. Okay, so you made high fructose corn syrup, right? Which is like sugar, like a sweetener. Well, you own the factory that produces the corn syrup, but you got to have the corn to put in the factory. So therefore, you buy the farmland that produces the corn. Okay, so now you produce the corn and you own the factory that produces the corn syrup. Okay, so then to take it a step further, Okay, you have these huge machines. You have the research that you pay for to come up with better chemicals and biotechnology to produce more corn. Okay, that's an agribusiness. A small family farm can't do that. They don't want to do that. Okay, but they can't do that even if they'd like to. It takes big money to make those things happen. Okay, large scale farms, there's a supply chain, right? There's the crop, like I just explained. There's the producer has to do transportation. Like you got to get huge trucks in there to get the corn from the farm to the train and then the train to the market, right? There's communication, there's information, there's consumers that have to be advertised to, right? All of this is called the commodity chain. It's literally getting the seed to harvest and then to the consumer. Okay, so what does this mean for big business? They own contracts, they own trucks, they own the factories themselves, they're the wholesalers. Okay, when they are doing this, they're producing so much of the stuff, so much of this economies of scale. Okay, they're making so many of these crops that they're making way more stuff, so they're not making as much money per unit. That's okay with them because they're making tons of it, so they're making plenty of money. That edges out that small farmer at home. Okay, so here's a commodity chain. You plant it, you grow it, you harvest it, you then process it, and then you market it, just like the corn syrup example that I used with you. Okay, that's the commodity chain from start to finish. Money can be made in all of these places, every one of them. You can make money if you're the planter, okay, and the grower and the harvester. Okay, somebody else can come in and make money as the processor. Somebody else can come in and make money doing the marketing to do this, okay, through an advertisement firm or whatever. Or one big company, agribusiness, can control all of this and make way more of a profit for the company. Okay, all right, so part of this is you have to have cool chains because some products that you make, it's kind of like the one of the vaccines, I think it's Pfizer vaccine, has to be refrigerated. It's got to be frozen, right? Well, that means you have to have a facility that can have that frozen. Well, farming is the same way. You have some products like beef, okay, that you would produce. Well, the beef needs to be cooled when it's shipped to the grocery store. So you have to have transportation that's going to keep that food cool throughout the trip. Okay, Mid-America Airport out in Belleville or Mascuda or whatever you want to call that, they do that. They get fruit from places like Peru, Bolivia, Central America, right, in South America. They get fruit from there like crazy, and they fly that fruit in here frozen, not frozen, but refrigerated in an airplane. And then they take it out of the airplane, put it in a refrigerated truck, and drive it to Schnucks, and then we buy it. Okay, that's a commodity chain that's refrigerated. It's a cool chain. Obviously, technology has allowed that to happen, right? Without that technology, our fruit costs more money because we have to get it here inside the United States. Okay, and if it's from far away, that's going to be way expensive to do that. We've cheapened that, right? The cost is way down, so we can get more food readily available. That's good for us, okay, because our country is developed and we can get that cool chain. But if we lived in a developing country in the third or in the poor parts of the world, right, they don't have those kind of cool chains. They don't have the technology to do that, so they can't get the food that we have. It's not available to them. Okay, luxury crops. This is not essential to human survival, but they have a high profit margin. Coffee is the best example. Chocolate is another great example. Tobacco is another one. We don't have to have those things. We would survive without chocolate and coffee and tobacco. However, it's a luxury and people are willing to pay for it. Okay, so in parts of the world, they grow these crops and they grow tons of them. Coffee, again, is a great example, but here's the problem. Okay, they can't afford what they produce. So the local farmers, okay, they grow these luxury crops and they sell them for good money and they make good money. The problem is they don't grow food. So they don't grow food to eat because they can make more money growing these luxury crops to sell to the developed world, Europe and America, right? So it drives up the cost of food for the local people. So they make money, but not all of them. And then they don't have the money to buy the food locally because there's not as much food produced locally. Okay, so the production of this over the long haul may not be sustainable. They're going to have to make some changes to this, which means the cost of our cup of coffee might have to go up a little bit, and the cost of our chocolate might have to go up a little bit. So people in the developing world can produce more stuff. Okay, and then they can have their own economy, right? They can make more money and produce more, and then they can purchase things at their own place. Okay, intercropping was mentioned earlier, but that's two or more of the same crops. You can see from this picture, it's a great example. It appears that there's corn, okay, there's also strawberries and watermelons that are being grown in that same field, okay? Doing this helps to prevent soil erosion. Erosion is when the soil is washed away by rainfall or whatever, wind it could be, but it's usually water. So this helps to hold these things in place, hold the roots in place a little bit more, and it helps the soil, okay, replenish itself because you're not doing the same thing year after year after year, which is monocropping, okay, with large amounts of pesticides. Monocropping without pesticides is you're going to be done. The soil is going to be totally useless after a few years. Okay, the bid rent theory. I'm going to watch this video, but basically it's this. The further you go away from the city center, the central business district, the less expensive land gets. Therefore, where do you farm? Okay, so I'm going to go to this picture next. If you look at this is the St. Louis metropolitan area. Okay, where is the cheapest land? Is it in downtown St. Louis or is it out by Carlisle Lake? Okay, the central business district is downtown St. Louis, where Busch Stadium is and all the high-rise buildings. That's the central business district. Okay, well, when you go further out, by Carlisle, there's not nearly as many people. There's not nearly as much demand for that land. Okay, so the land is cheaper. It's more expensive in the central business district. Okay, let's take a look at this. We won't watch the whole thing. It's only a few minutes long, but we'll take a look at it. Okay, so this means, and you'll see this chart in just a minute. So this means the commercial sector, so the people selling stuff, they're willing to pay big money to be in the central business district because that means more business for them. There's more people there. Okay, so if you're going to open a restaurant, you're going to pay more in downtown St. Louis, like on Washington Avenue or whatever, across from the convention center where there's always people. You're going to pay more money for that restaurant, that land that you're renting. It's going to be more expensive than it would be if you were out in Carlisle or in the middle of central Illinois. Okay, so now the industry sector, so factories, right? They don't want to be right downtown anymore because it's too expensive, right? And there are examples in St. Louis of where there used to be factories downtown, like the City Museum, that used to be a shoe factory. Okay, well, that's long gone because the shoe factory figured out that it was way too expensive to be down there. So they moved away from the central business district to set up their factories, right? A lot of them went north. Some of them came to Illinois. Some of them went south of the city. Okay, but the industry sector moves away from that central business district. Okay, so if you look on this simplified distance decay model, you can see in purple the shops and offices can afford the high land values of the CBD. So then you got that picture right there. And if you look at the triangle that's created that goes down to where the circle is, okay, that's the shops and offices where the price is high, but shops and offices are willing to be down there in that area. And then the next one you see going across the bottom, if you go to that circle and you go across the bottom, then there's industry that's in that region. And then when you get past the industry, that's where the houses are. You and I know that as suburbs, okay, or out past the cities. So basically, as you move away from the central business district, land gets cheaper. And so you have different use of that land. Now, when you get past the residential zone, then you're going to have the agricultural zone because the land's going to be way cheaper, okay, out there. So that first one, people will pay more money for closer to the CBD. And there's different bid or rent curves. So the price of things is different as you get away from the city. And this doesn't take in all the factors. Okay, the curve for the residential starts lower so that you can have more houses out there, right? So there's goods and bads about this rent theory, right? It's just pretty much the same throughout the world. It helps us understand how cities grow, and it's simple and easy to understand. Now, there's some things that aren't so great about this. Okay, we're going to run across something you'll see in the city unit called gentrification. Okay, which means people come back into the city and prices go up. Okay, in parts of the city. So, and not all countries have a super demand for land in the central business district. It depends on the amount of business that's going on in that part of the world. Okay, so that's the bid rent theory. Remember, the basics are the closer you are to the central business district, the more expensive the land is, which is why there are different uses as you get away from the city, right? So like here, you can see there's different uses. There's going to be different if you go up there where it says Grafton, right? Way up north up there. Well, that's going to look way different in Grafton than it's going to look in downtown St. Louis, okay? Because the land use is different. Okay, so here's that model they had on there, and you can see the purple of shops and offices matches with the shops and offices up top. The industry triangle down there also matches with the industry cannot afford the highest land values. The blue and the blue go together. The triangles are the same. And the same is true for the residential. Okay, you can see that housing can only afford the low land values because that's where people are going to live. So as the distance from the CBD increases, CBD is the central business district, there's less competition for land, so the values fall. That's distance decay. From the cities, it's cheaper, right, from the central business district. All right, so there's another view of it. Okay, you get retail in the green, manufacturing, and residential. Doesn't even mention farming. Farming's on the outside of this. Okay. Okay, that brings us to the end of this. Spatial organization is next, but I will stop there.